Everyone. Welcome to another What I Would Have Done Thursday, and today I'm going to be briefly diving into a film titled Crossroads, and the particular Crossroads film that I'm addressing is the one that stars none other than Britany Spears. This movie was, I think, definitely not one of the best, at least when it comes to, I think, trying to do sort of premises that involve sort of trying to uh, have kind of a girly road trip. Not that there are obviously many movies that have really succeeded in doing this kind of concept, but here it's obviously not done fairly well. And it's got a pretty bad rating overall across various review sites. So I think it only makes sense that I kind of discuss ultimately what it's about and what I would have done to ultimately, I think, improve upon the film itself. So this was kind of a film that was sort of made right around sort of the uh, high of Britney Spears' career, like the peak, so to speak, and I think it kind of is in between that peak and trough. In other words, um, it made sense, at least during the time, to try to, I think, sort of enhance her exposure. I think only because, again, she was so popular and well recognized. Again, I really wasn't the biggest fan of her, even though I even remember people, even kids as young as 5, were listening to her particular girls. And for me, I didn't kind of really understand it all too much, even though I tried to get into it. It just really, her music wasn't for me. And I think uh, having her suddenly now try to do acting is also another thing that obviously, again, doesn't really work because, acting as well as singing, especially together, even, you have to make sure that you at least have some experience within those areas. And clearly, she doesn't really have a huge amount. And again, even her singing, I don't think is all that impressive either. So, um, and the premise of the film, although again it is designed to be very simple, it's where the film tries to insert some kind of deepness to it and tries to up the drama, is where I think it kind of loses its uh, impact, only because I don't think it knows really how to handle those difficult subject matters. And you'll sort of see what those subject matters sort of entail when you see the film. It's not to say that the film couldn't have had some rocky moments or some conflict, but the way in which they approach certain kind of angles onto what each particular character, at least main character, is kind of striving for, um, is a little too. It's almost unintentionally dark and very strange. And I think that they approach this with the idea of they're trying to spread awareness among the issues, in particular issues for teenage girls. But again, it does it in a way that not only lends itself to being a little bit over dramatized, but in doing that, there's a lot of points where the plot is kind of, a lot of things are done for convenience of the plot, as opposed to them actually being something that would be really plausible. So kind of the logic gets sort of wrapped around and lost. I really feel that if they just focused on it just being a road trip movie with these 3 main characters, including Britney Spears, and them just traveling around and maybe doing some singing here and there, and maybe throw in a little bit of conflicts, and then have maybe some kind of, bittersweet ending, would, I think, have lended itself a whole lot better than trying to insert these uh, points in which they try to make things a little bit too traumatic. For example, there is a teenage pregnancy within the film. There's uh, it's not, and there's also a rape because and which ends up resulting from the pregnancy. So again, it is trying to kind of dive into really serious issues, but in doing so, there is sort of this lighthearted, feminine kind of energy that it gives off. And those things don't really jive all too well. You almost have to pick what you want to focus on. If you want to focus on being a dramatic piece, or if you want to have it be fun and just uh, very upbeat and sort of lighthearted. And again, it's not that it couldn't have had certain moments of tension. It's just that the amount of different layers of tension that they put into this movie just feels uncalled for. Like, why would a teenage pregnant girl go on a road trip out of all things? And a lot of, again, also the supposed, I guess, dude that Britany Spears ends up sort of being within the film is an ex-convict. Again, so there is just a lot of really strange ways in which they tried to execute this film. And again, a lot of it has to do with the plot and sort of the character setups. And I honestly felt had they just created a certain amount of normalness as opposed to these fairly extreme cases of very traumatic circumstances, then it would have been a whole lot more, I think, interesting, and it would have at least allowed itself to kind of be a little bit more identifiable, be a little more down to earth, at least, instead of trying to overfill itself with this certain amount of deep, dramatic, or at least trying to insert dramatic moments where I felt like they didn't really need to put those things in there. Uh, so I think that's really the heart of really where all of the problems go with this film. Obviously, the acting is not as up to par as a lot of other films, and yeah, the singing is not all that great either, and really the singing is not a primary focus even really of the film, although it takes up a certain part of the story. It's not really a main focus. Um, I guess if I would be doing a film that involved Britney Spears, I would assume that I would probably try to have her sing. I almost felt like she should have just sang her songs, or at least pick some songs that sort of relate onto what's going on within the story. Um, that would have maybe made sense. Um, at one point, she's singing at a karaoke bar, or another point she's singing on the road or something, and maybe they're sort of asking for change or something because maybe they ran out of money or something. I mean, there could have been a ton of different ways in which they kind of approached the way in which the singing is sort of carried about, but it's kind of just inserted there just for the sake of it kind of being there and not having really any huge amount of context to the story. And I think that if you had done that, the songs would have left more of an impact, and it would have given the Britney Spears image something that people, I think, could at least get behind, considering the fact that, again, she initially started off as a singer. Uh, but I think that's really my honest opinion. I'm sure there are definitely other avenues into which the story could have gone, but I think, just stripping it down plainly through a girl road trip, not having these, again, kind of wacky and traumatic scenarios that really don't serve a huge amount of weight or purpose to the story, and at the same time, creating at least a little bit of conflict, but not to the point to where, again, there's a certain amount of over dramaticness to it. And also, you know, not trying to insert other characters like the one guy, the ex-convict that they run into that Britney Spears sort of ends up with, or really doesn't. But again, you know, he shouldn't have, I think, he obviously been in this film either. I mean, they could have obviously replaced him with some other dude or somebody else that they ran into. You know, again, there could have been a ton of different angles, and that's what's so great about these simple kinds of stories is you can do so much with them. But sometimes the approach of trying to be deep, trying to be really intuitive into really hard and heavy material is sometimes not called for. And I think clearly here it's not really necessarily called for all too much, especially when Britney Spears songs are kind of, you know, they're mostly upbeat and kind of, you know, they have that very kind of sexy edge to them. You know, they're not really designed to be kind of uh, very powerful songs. You know, they're just kind of just simple pop. It only makes sense that you know you'd think that the plot would try to follow a simple format, but it really doesn't, unfortunately, and that's where I think it ultimately fails on so many levels. But that's honestly what I would have done. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of different ways in which it could have been approached, but that's just my honest opinion. I'd be more than happy to hear what anybody else has to say. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.